Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting. I'm joined today by Scott Billeck to talk about the latest news regarding the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets are coming off a 4-2 win over the St. Louis Blues at home on Tuesday night. A very good performance by the Jets all around. And to be honest, Scott, the way I've been looking at it in terms of looking through all the numbers and the analytics and everything is that the Jets are playing pretty good hockey so far this season. Five out
Yeah.
of the six games, they've been pretty good in terms of the possession game. And usually, when you're leading that possession game, you're going to have a chance to win the game. What are your thoughts on the start for this team so far in terms of not the record at 3-3, but just how they're playing overall?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that if the Jets keep playing this kind of brand of hockey, and I think we've seen it in, I would argue four of the six games so far. I think you could make an argument for five of the six games. But my point is that if you keep playing this brand of hockey, the Jets are going to win more times than not. They're top 10 in both possession metrics and in expected goals. Last night, on Tuesday night, they played maybe one of the most complete games against St. Louis. It was from, opening whistle to the final whistle. It was just a good game. The Jets held on to a lead in the third period. Obviously, there was a little bit of a fluky goal that made it 3-2. That goes off a skate right to an open guy with St. Louis's net empty. But I think overall, you look at this team, and I think they're probably let down a little bit by goaltending early on in the season. Like, you get a few more saves early on. This team could be, potentially 4-2, possibly as good as 5-1 right now. They got a good win over the weekend in Edmonton. It wasn't their best game, let's say that, but at the end of the day, they had the best goalie, and oftentimes with this Jets team, if they have the best goalie on the night, they're winning a lot of hockey games. I think you could make the argument this season, as long as they have average goaltending so far, they'll be the better hockey team. And that's just the way that this team has played so far. So yeah, I mean, I look at it overall, and if I'm a fan, if I'm looking at, as from a player's perspective, it's just, this team has played well enough to win more games than it has so far. And when it's had adequate goaltending, as we've seen over the last couple of games from Connor Hellebuyck, this team wins hockey games, and I think that's kind of the bottom line for the Jets right now.
Yeah, I think the first three games for Hellebuyck, his save percentage was only 843. He's
Yeah.
picked that up. It's now up to 881. That's nothing special, but it's obviously on the rise. And his last two performances were very good. Of course, a disruption for the Jets this week with the news, very concerning news for everyone
Yeah.
involving the Jets that Rick Bonus's wife, Judy, has had a seizure and she was in the hospital. Rick's taken a leave of absence to be with her. And it's the second year in a row where he's had to miss time behind the bench. Scott Arniel steps in though, and I mean it's pretty seamless when Scott
Yeah.
Arniel steps in, isn't it? He just seems very calm, very in control. And from what I remember last year, the Jets did pretty well with Arniel in there. Jets have a pretty good situation in that way, don't they, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Connor said it to me on Monday when we found out the news about Judy, and just an update. Judy's at home now after having been sent to the hospital, and she's recovering. All signs are pointing to good in that way. So, just kind of to update that situation, it looks like good news all around on Judy Bonus. So that's obviously great to hear. But yeah, it's Kyle Connor was talking about next man up mentality when it comes to the coaching staff. This isn't the first time, as you said, that they've been without Rick Bonus for a few games, and that obviously happened last year when he had COVID, and it was kind of two stints. It was early on in the season. He came back for a game, and he was out for a couple more games as he was dealing with some long COVID symptoms, and yeah, the Jets did well without him. And I think part of it yesterday, or at least part of it on Tuesday, was about this team kind of rallying behind both head coach and obviously Judy as well. And so yeah, it is a seamless transition. I think the coaching staff is so integrated here into kind of every facet of what everybody else does that yet you can just have associate coach Scott Arniel step up and and nothing changes, right? The message is still the same. The way that this team wants to play the game is very clear amongst the players. And so, if Rick Bowness has to step away, or anybody on that coaching staff has to step away, it's pretty clear to even just the players, how they're supposed to play the game. So yeah, I don't think there's been anything. I think Scott Arniel, this is not, again, like I said, not the first time he's done it, but he comes in and it's just very calm. Like you said, it's very, just very business-like approach from Scott Arniel, and I think that's just the way it's got to be. It just needs to be, especially in both situations, it's been kind of extenuating circumstances as to why, Bonus hasn't been there. So, yeah, I mean, this team's just, especially this year, probably more so than even last year, because last year they basically had one training camp with him and they had to be without him for their first road trip of the season. I don't believe Brick is going on the road. So yeah, I mean, it's just they're in good hands with the way that this coaching staff is so kind of tightly woven. So yeah, it hasn't been an issue, and looks like it'll be fine, kind of moving forward if he's not in Detroit or Montreal this week.
And I mean, it's interesting. The Jets now get to go out on a bit of a road trip. Detroit, which is a surprisingly good team so far this year. It'll be interesting to see if that is good for the Jets, because there's been this thing hanging over them since they've been home for the last little while, and that's that the fans aren't really turning out. All-time low of 11,126, I think it was, on Tuesday night against St. Louis. It's tough times right now for the Jets in terms of their ability to fill the house. The economic situation in Winnipeg is obviously not great. The message that the Jets have sent out since last spring in terms of trying to get the support on board is clearly not resonated with the right people, and they've got a big job ahead of them. We do understand that owner Mark Chipman has sat down with the team's broadcast partner, TSN. He's going to give some explanation to the fans, speak sort of directly to the fans about this. He hasn't been willing to answer questions from the local media about this, but they've decided that this is the tack they're going to take, and they're going to try to address the fans directly and try to figure out a way to get people more on board with this. I don't think there's any threat of this team leaving Winnipeg.
No.
I mean, this is the infancy of this. It's almost a silly question when you think about it. They've got one of the richest sports owners in the world in David Thompson. Mark Chipman's team, according to Forbes, made lots of money even last season when they didn't have great attendance. I don't think that's even really an issue, but it is optically poor on this city that all of a sudden this market, which everyone knows is the smallest market in the league, cannot attract, even within 4,000 of filling the building. So Scott, some thoughts on what we've seen in that area and how this might work for the Jets as they go on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to get away from that distraction, right? Like, the players haven't really talked about it since last week. I mean, they talked about it a fair bit last week because, it was news then. I mean, obviously, it's still news now because just on Tuesday, it was their lowest attended game in 2.0 history. The players notice, that there's no fans in the crowd, but at the same time, I mean, it was still pretty loud in that building. You got to give Jets fans credit. They make up for the 4,000 extra seats with their voices and that sort of thing. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Mark Chipman has to say. It's a shame that he doesn't, speak to the local media. I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's questions that need to be answered and want to be answered by the season ticket holders, from former season ticket holders, from people who are just buying into it. But to think that this team is, on the precipice of leaving, it would be wrong. I mean, you look at how much that is being invested by Chipman downtown. You don't do that if you're trying to. I just don't see why you would be investing that kind of capital in the surrounding areas if you're not, trying to prop up. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, you're trying to attract people downtown, and so when you're buying buildings, building up areas, Portage Place, for example, You're doing that with your team in mind, with the Jets in mind, to create whatever atmosphere downtown. We see this in other cities. You look at the Ice District in Edmonton and how that's popped up over the years, trying to make this nice place around Rogers Place, which is their billion-dollar arena that they have there. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any imminent the Jets are moving to Houston or Salt Lake City or whatever. I don't think any of that. And honestly, most of that, I think, came from most of the problem came from this team in the springtime almost threatening that with that video that they threw out. So they've kind of created their own storm, and you wonder how much that's affected ticket sales. And there's a ton of things, right? There's so many factors that go into why people aren't buying tickets right now. That's what this team needs to figure out. They need to figure out how to address those issues and all that. But at the same time, I don't know if it's going to get any better or I don't know if it might still get worse, right? Like Tuesday was worse than it was against LA, right? And it was in the season opener, and they only got marginally a little bit better against Vegas in the Vegas game. So does it get worse before it gets better? That kind of remains to be seen. But I'm a firm believer, and I always have been, that if you put a winning product on the ice, people are going to come and watch it, because that's what people do. People want to see winning. Just look at, I mean, you cover the Blue Bombers, Ted. I mean, that place was selling 25,000 tickets when this team wasn't whatever, and that's 10,000 short of a sellout there. But now they're selling out games against the Edmonton Elks that mean absolutely nothing at the end of the year, and people are still coming out and having a heck of a time. I mean, I was there on Friday night or on Saturday night for 3/4 of the game. You were obviously there covering the game. It's a great time to be a Bombers fan. It's a great time just to go out and have a good night at the field. They make a really good they do a really good job of kind of doing that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just good for this team to kind of probably get away from a little bit of that, but it's going to be something, it's the elephant in the room, and the elephant's hard to move right now. And so we're going to see kind of, what happens going forward, but not my job to fix, not our job to fix, but it's something that obviously, I think this team is obviously looking to fix, and part of that's going to come on how good they're doing on the ice. I think, at the end of the day, the winning and being a good hockey team is going to just attract fans back to the place. But the Jets haven't been really given people maybe over the last couple of years kind of reason to believe. But so far I think we're looking at a team that's much improved, even if they don't have some of the star power that they had a couple of years ago or even last year.
Yeah, I think you're right on a lot of those points, and you bring up the Bombers. Obviously, that's only 10 games a year.
True. Yeah.
In a playoff game here and there, and that's an easier sell. A lot of those games are played on beautiful July nights.
Yeah.
It's a great atmosphere at that stadium. They've built something really good, and of course, it's the winning that brought the people in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we get all that. There's no doubt. I'm not sure that this disconnect with the Jets is all about wins and losses. I do think that there's a disconnect there that stems partly from the exit interviews last year, from the way the way the players reacted to Rick Bowness challenging them, to certainly that video that you talked about that basically threatened people, and people didn't take it well. It seems it just didn't hit with the right people anyways.
Right.
But there's a chance to rebuild it. It's something that they have to just make sure that they do it. Like you said, the Bombers were there, right? They've been there. They've had marathons. They've had drives to save the team.
Yeah.
They've had needs for this over their existence. They've managed to keep a pretty steady base, even when losing. When they didn't win 29 years in a row in the Grey Cup, they still kept the people. And then when things got good, it really picked up again. And you have to think there's a chance that that's how it will go for the Jets as well. But either way, it's going to be a tough road for the next little while. The best thing the Jets can do, in my opinion, is keep playing a good brand of hockey, and that's what that team has done so far. It's not always been resulting in wins, but they've played quite well. So for Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman, and you've been watching Jet Setting on WinnipegSun.com.